explained in a single graph, but this is one of them. Less law enforcement means more crime, and over time it means more dead children, more grieving parents. You don't need to be a criminologist to understand this. It's very obvious. Even Lori Lightfoot gets it. Lori Lightfoot is the mayor of Chicago. Thanks to her equity-based policies, the city of Chicago is falling apart. People are dying in huge numbers. Shootings in Chicago jumped 60% last year. Lori Lightfoot knows perfectly well this is happening. She knows why it is happening, but Lori Lightfoot doesn't care. Lori Lightfoot is so uninterested in all of those deaths, mostly of black people, that she won't even answer questions about them when asked. Watch this exchange. It comes from Tuesday of this week.
Every time you have a press conference, you say crime is down. The economy is booming.
Well, that's not true, but get your question, sir.
Across the street, we had a police officer on duty, the victim of a hit and run. We have Michigan Avenue, the magnificent mile is now referred to as the Mile of Fear. The water tower place has thrown the keys back to the lender. They say they don't want to be in Chicago anymore. Real Chicagoans are asking me, how could you possibly even consider running for re-election as mayor of the city of Chicago after all the harm you've caused?
Well, I disagree with you fundamentally, and I don't think I need to address and dignify your comments 1 second further. Next question.
Next question. So Lori Lightfoot won't answer the question precisely because she knows the answer. In the name of equity, officials in Chicago have stopped enforcing the law. And not some esoteric tax law that no one really understands. The basic laws, like you can't hurt other people. They're releasing criminals who go on to murder more citizens. This is the triumph of ideology over human life. Here's just one example. It comes from Fox's Chicago station.
The details on the offender's prior history does call into question how he was released. This document from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office says in June of 2021, 16-year-old Anthony Brown led police on a foot chase. That's when they recovered a loaded .22 caliber Glock handgun with an extended magazine. 5 days later, he was released on electronic monitoring. 14 days later, the bracelet came off and he was put on a curfew. 6 months later, they say he was involved in a carjacking. This time, police recovered a loaded Glock 9mm handgun with a round in the chamber. That's when he was put back on monitoring. In the case of Tuesday's shooting, the 16-year-old is charged with first-degree murder and carjacking. He carjacked a Lyft driver earlier in the day and took off in that same Infiniti after the alleged shooting of a teen he didn't even know.
Stories like this constantly in the city of Chicago, cities across the country. They're always the same, but the details of this one tell you everything. A criminal runs from the police carrying an illegal gun. Then the same politicians who never stop lecturing you about gun control, it's immoral to defend yourself, they scream at you. Those same people let this guy who used a gun to commit a crime out of jail immediately because equity. Then he gets rid of his ankle monitor and commits a carjacking. Then what happens? Well, Lori Lightfoot's friends release him once again because incarceration bad. So what does he do? He drives off to shoot and kill a 15-year-old. Because why wouldn't he? There's no penalty. Now, if tragedies like this happened occasionally, you would call them accidents. You would feel sad, but you wouldn't be bothered. These are not accidents. This is happening every day in the city of Chicago. Fully 43% of all criminals convicted in the state of Illinois commit new crimes within 3 years of being released, and some are released very early. That's a high number compared to other states. In saner places like Texas, South Carolina, West Virginia, the recidivism rate after 3 years is about half of that. What's the difference? Politics. Honestly, that's not a partisan talking point. It's true. For the last decade, for example, the most liberal state in the country, California, has recorded a recidivism rate of nearly 50%. Now, keep in mind the irony here. They tell you that we shouldn't incarcerate people because incarceration doesn't work, and if you really want to rehabilitate people, you have to let them out. But they're not rehabilitated. That's why they're reoffending at almost 50% in the state of California. So incarceration has two purposes. One is to improve the prisoner so he won't reoffend, but the main purpose is to protect the rest of us who aren't committing crimes, who've got kids who just want to live a normal life. They've forgotten that part. So every day in California, politicians release truly dangerous criminals back into the public sphere. And this is why you're now taking a very big risk if you dare to use public transportation in the city of Los Angeles. You could be shot or sexually assaulted. And we're not guessing. We have the tape. Here's surveillance footage from LA's transit system. It's on your screen right now. It includes pictures of a woman being raped in public as she's sitting down. We're cutting some of it out. That happened in public. And it happens a lot, that kind of thing. So we went to LA for the premiere of season 2 of our documentary series. We went there because we wanted to understand how one man, a man called George Gascon, a prosecutor backed by George Soros, could have done so much in such little time to destroy the city. And of course, he did it in the name of equity. We talked to the family of a murder victim called Fatima Johnson. It was a bracing conversation.
Fatima Johnson, a mother of 6, was found brutally murdered in her apartment.
She was violently murdered, beaten to death, hogtied, and gagged.
The suspect is a career criminal called Daryl Collins. Collins served decades in prison for 2 murders as well as a string of armed robberies.
He had quite an extensive criminal history, a series of armed robberies. He killed 2 different people on 2 separate occasions. He was under 25 when he committed those murders. He was eligible for youthful parole, and the parole board decided, oh, it looks like, you've rehabilitated yourself, and we'll go ahead and release you. That was a huge mistake.
And he came in and told my mom he was going to marry her, and, he would be our stepdad. Prince Charming bullshit.
Despite previous convictions for murder, and despite the fact that Fatima Johnson was bound and horrifyingly tortured before she was killed, George Gascon is refusing to add any enhancements to this case. George Gascon is not the only corrupt prosecutor who's doing this. George Soros has paid for people just like George Gascon in many American cities. Kim Foxx in Chicago, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, Alvin Bragg now in Manhattan, others. In every case, many Americans, thousands overall, have died as a result. So who's benefiting from this slaughter, and how exactly are they benefiting? That's a fair question you've got to wonder. We do know for certain that voters don't want it. Americans want the laws they voted for to be enforced, and that is true of black voters just like any others, because why wouldn't it be? Sorry, white liberals, black people don't love crime, actually. You're not helping black people by increasing the amount of crime in their neighborhoods. And a new Pew poll proves this. The poll asked black adults what they cared about most. And guess what? It wasn't racism and diversity or equity. That was near the bottom of the list. What they cared about most was, quote, violence and crime. That's what they cared about. Why wouldn't they care about it? So as Pete Buttigieg frets about racist roads, thousands of black people are dying of gunshot wounds. Normal people are sick of this. In San Francisco, the lunatic equity-mongering DA there, Chesa Boudin, is facing a recall, which could succeed. Boudin has, among other things, encouraged open-air narcotics markets throughout the city of San Francisco. And as a result, you guessed it, more than twice as many people have died from drug ODs in San Francisco than from COVID. Who could support something like that? You'd have to be pretty out of touch. Well, singer John Legend does, quote, I endorsed Chesa for DA when he ran for election, Legend tweeted, and I support him now. Of course you do, John Legend. The Biden administration supports him too. Just days ago, police in Washington raided an apartment where they found a dog called Pablo. The dog had been stolen at gunpoint by thieves who also took drugs and money. At gunpoint. So police arrested 4 men, 3 juveniles in the apartment. A few hours later, Joe Biden's Justice Department announced it was refusing to charge any of them.
The U.S. Attorney's Office has decided not to move forward with what they were charged with, and also confirmed that the 4 adults that were arrested have been released. I can tell you the 7 people arrested yesterday were charged with receiving stolen property. So receiving Pablo in this case. Pablo was one of 2 dogs stolen during a Wednesday violent crime spree that police say lasted nearly an hour. There were 4 incidents reported within that time frame, including a double shooting in Northeast D.C., along with the armed robberies of 2 dog owners. Police tell us that when they recovered Pablo in a Northeast D.C. apartment, that they also apprehended some items here, including drugs, a pistol, an AR-15 style rifle, and ammunition.
So what happens when you allow people to commit violence? The one thing the state can never do. The state has a monopoly on violence. In a democracy, we decide when violence is appropriate. But what happens when you allow antisocial elements to commit all the violence they want? You get a lot of violence. And your cities start to resemble third world hellholes. People are executed in broad daylight, and no one bothers to call the cops. That just happened in Atlanta.
51-year-old security guard Anthony Frazier getting out of his vehicle on Monday near Cleveland Avenue in southwest Atlanta. Little does Frazier know he's about to be murdered. Now watch as the suspected gunman walks toward him with a pistol in his right hand. Another man sitting there in the curb will watch the whole thing happen. Police don't show the actual shooting, just the aftermath. Frazier laying there on the ground dead. His bloodied body has been blurred. The alleged gunman goes through his belongings before casually walking away from the scene. Remarkably, the witness who was sitting at the corner gets up and walks by Frazier's lifeless body, just shaking his head in apparent disbelief. Then 2 other men approach the victim and also appear to search him. Take a closer look. We've zoomed in on the video as they then walk away with what appears to be the deceased victim's wallet.
There's something really wrong with everyone in that video except the dead man. There's something really wrong with the rest of us for putting up with this and not figuring out why exactly it's happening. It's a little more complicated than racism and mass incarceration. Something really dark is going on. But we can say that these sorts of things happen a lot more than they otherwise would when you decide that laws should be applied on the basis of skin color. When you decide that, a lot of people die. They bleed out in gutters on city streets as the rest of the neighborhood hides indoors in terror. And as it happens, most of the dead come from the very group our leaders say they're protecting. We love you so much, we're letting you die. That's the equity agenda. Too bad BLM never told us how it was going to end. Subscribe to the Fox News YouTube channel to catch our nightly opens, stories that are changing the world and changing your life.
So I was Fencer messaged me I think yesterday or something like that.
Yeah, we just heard it beeping.
That's not there's nothing. My shit is, you can't hear my shit. She messaged me yesterday.
I think he.
It's 100% he. First of all,
Yeah.
Although now it ruins the joke for Ed when I show you the picture. But that's okay. I've just been building that up for an hour. And waiting.
I didn't know. You just used the wrong pronoun.
I did it on purpose to like fool him into thinking she was a girl, and then I was going to get him all hot. I was going to say that she was my girlfriend, and that I was uncomfortable with the amount of cleavage that she showed on her Twitch streams, and I was going to get Ed's opinion, and I had a whole thing going. Anyway.
Oh wow, this is quite the build-up.
But anyway, she sent me this picture.
Whoa.
And I was like, we haven't had a girl on the show in a while. Do you want to come on in a week or 2? And she said, let me see what she said. Sweet, I'm free on the 14th, maybe not the 21st. I will find some good outfits though, so you can continue to ignore that I'm still a guy. And I said, sweet, I'm going to continue to ignore it for as long as you do. Could you show that picture?
Yeah.
I mean, she's on stream there.
Yeah, it's
like
I don't get it. I don't see where the. I'm like,
you want some help?
I want to make my guess before I get help.
Okay.
So previously he had what are sometimes called chicken cutlets, and you can like put what looks like a chicken cutlet under a bra, and it fills out a bra, and it looks great. They look great. But now this is a whole new thing, and clearly you can see it's not just filling out a shirt, a bra. You're getting side boob. I suspect that it's going up to roughly his collarbone. That it's like a
a
whole
prosthetic.
Yeah, it's a full prosthetic. I'm not sure which one he has. There's some that stop just below the bust line. There's some that go down the waist, and there's some that are like full body fucking creepy mode suits, like in Silence of the Lambs. But I'm guessing that the choker is concealing it, along with some makeup and maybe even a bit of like spirit gum, like a glue that's like skin safe, like to really lay the latex or whatever the material is down.
You can see the latex there.
There it is. The choker's hiding it. Perfect.
Yeah, I feel like there's a tiny difference in skin tone above.
Oh no, there's a lip there, but still, fucking 10 out of 10, like fakery here, like you've killed it. You've become a better woman than anyone.
The South China Sea, a region of tremendous economic and geostrategic importance. Below the seabed, you find massive oil and natural gas reserves worth trillions. In the waters, you find vast marine life that is crucial to the food security of millions of Southeast Asians. On the surface, you find 1/3 of the world's maritime shipping industry passing through the waters, carrying over $3 trillion in trade each and every single year. And if you put all of that together, you start to understand why the South China Sea is so important. This is why it's heavily contested by multiple nations. But as with anything in life, some just don't play by the rules. Since 2013, China has been trying to claim almost 90% of the South China Sea. China argues it has historic rights over this territory because Chinese analysts and academics contend that the islands of the South China Sea were first discovered by China's Han Dynasty more than 2 millennia ago. This is how the infamous 9-9 came to be, that overlaps multiple countries' exclusive economic zones, including Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam. This led to a fair amount of tension between China and these nations. But China knew it couldn't claim a territory they had no infrastructure or civilians on, so they started construction of man-made islands in the South China Sea in hopes of them being accepted as Chinese territory. Or at least that was what we thought they were doing, until satellite imagery revealed the alarming truth. China was building military bases on the islands equipped with airstrips and high-tech equipment such as anti-aircraft guns. It was clear that China was ready to do whatever it took to take control of the South China Sea. This would eventually lead to the Philippines bringing this to an international tribunal in The Hague that unsurprisingly ruled against China's claims to the sea. However, China promptly rejected the authority of the tribunal and its findings in the case, which led to China continuing its operations in the South China Sea. This is the reason why China still to this day has a strong presence in the area. But recent events have indicated that China's presence in the area might soon be over. Not only is China's biggest enemy, the United States, beginning to strengthen its presence in the region through countless freedom of navigation operations, but Vietnam, the country that opposes China's claims the most, has quietly been building up 10 artificial islands that all have a very specific purpose. And recent reports have stated that China might have sabotaged itself through poor building practices, as the concrete that keeps China's islands from sinking is cracking. So let's find out what all of this means for China and the future of the South China Sea by first understanding the United States' growing interest to perform freedom of navigation operations, also known as FONAs, in the area. Freedom of navigation operations are operations performed by the United States Naval and Air Forces to reinforce internationally recognized rights and freedoms by challenging excessive maritime claims. The particulars of each operation vary depending on the maritime claim that is being protested. But in the case of China's claims in the South China Sea, the United States has sent multiple warships well into the exclusive economic zone of China's man-made islands. This, along with information found in a Chinese magazine published by the company that builds China's Navy ships, has revealed the weaknesses of these islands. And they found 4 crucial aspects in which these islands are vulnerable to attacks. First is the location of the islands. And by looking at this map, you can see they lie a fair distance away from mainland China. The distance means that China's fastest combat support ships would need more than 20 hours to reach the islands. The islands are also too far away to deploy the J-16, China's most advanced multi-role strike fighter. The fighters simply can't patrol the area because of the distance between the military bases on mainland China and on the islands. Furthermore, the islands only have 1 runway, and therefore do not have the space to provide the facilities needed to support more than 1 aircraft at a time. This means that in the event of a conflict, a plane unloading or refueling on the islands would have to stay on the runway at all times, preventing other aircraft from using it. So if we add up all of these weaknesses together, it's clear that China's man-made islands won't be able to stand up against an attack from another nation, although China is probably aware of this. And while it is true that these islands would be easy to attack, China may rely on the fact that any attack against any base in the South China Sea, even an outpost considered illegal under international law, would be considered an act of war against a nuclear power with vast military resources. The threat of retaliation alone may be sufficient to prevent the islands from facing any attack. And let's not forget that China isn't the only country with vulnerable bases far from its mainland that could be taken out by early strikes. Examples of this is the United States island of Guam and the Japanese island of Okinawa, where major US air bases are located. These are both within range of Chinese missile attacks, something China has reminded the United States of in the past. This is why a direct attack on the islands is highly unlikely. But what about an attack from nature? Well, the airstrips located on these islands are very close to the ocean, which leaves them exposed to damage from tides and tropical weather. However, this might not even be their biggest concern, as their artificial islands probably don't need external forces to sink, at least if you are to believe recent rumors claiming the concrete used in the foundation of these islands is cracking and turning to sponge, which, if it turns out to be true, China might have to leave the islands for good, leaving the South China Sea to be claimed by opposing nations. This is where Vietnam comes into the picture, as they have quietly been building up 10 artificial islands without the world noticing, and since 2017, Vietnam has slowly added buildings to some of these islands. The goal is to make these islands self-sustaining, which would make it incredibly difficult for China to take them. Vietnam has also shown on multiple occasions that they are not afraid to bump shoulders with Chinese vessels, if necessary. This has forced China to leave Vietnam alone, as any further actions could lead to a nuclear war. Although the Vietnamese government has made it very clear they have no other intentions with their man-made islands than to defend themselves. This explains why they have put solar panels on the islands and are trying to grow crops as well. But let's try and zoom out a bit, as this looks just like a massive game of chess, where a single wrong move could mean the destruction of multiple nations. And reality is that every single nation is aware of this, which is why they get as close to the line as possible without ever crossing it. Even if we will never see a war in the South China Sea, it seems there are only two possible outcomes. Either China surrenders, or we will have an everlasting chess game in the South China Sea. And while China might not want to surrender, it might have to, because